Sure. Okay, now let's talk about the Gemara that we learned. We learned the Gemara yesterday about the fact that one of the brisas that we saw regarding the source of davening, one of the brisas implied that the only source of davening is the sacrifices, and that seemed to contradict an earlier idea that was mentioned by Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Chanina, that the prayers were instituted by the patriarchs. And so the Gemara said, maybe this is a tiyufta. Maybe this proves Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Chanina wrong. The Gemara answered, no, it doesn't prove him wrong, because he doesn't disagree with his statement. It doesn't contradict the brisa. The brisa doesn't contradict his statement. The brisa is in a connection with the statement of his that the patriarchs initiated the prayers, but they also relying on the sacrifices. They're also connected to the sacrifices, and the source that he says, he brings a proof, because what are you going to do about Musaf? Musaf, who established it? He says it must be that the prayers are connected to the sacrifices. Even if you say the patriarchs initiated the prayers, nevertheless, you still have to say that they are connected to the sacrifices. That was the first Gemara. Then the next Gemara talked about, whenever you say until, does it mean until but not including, or does it mean until and including? And we went back and forth. It was a little complicated because initially we thought we had a proof from our Mishnah that whenever it says until, it means until but not including. And the initial source, the initial proof was that it has to mean until and not including, was because it says until halfway through Mincha. And if it means until and including, that would mean until and including the entire, through the entire Mincha Katana, the entire short time period of Mincha, which would mean all the way up to sunset. Now, if that's true, if that's correct, that it means all the way up to sunset, because it means until and including, then Rabbi Yehuda is basically saying the same thing as the rabbis. And we see in the Mishnah that there's an argument. So the Gemara says it must mean that until means until, but not including. And therefore, Rabbi Yehuda would say until halfway through Mincha, but not including that second half of Mincha. And this way, he's arguing with the rabbis who say until sunset. Rabbi Yehuda says until halfway through Mincha, and the rabbis say until sunset. And therefore, until means until, but not including. Then the Gemara says, no, but what about the other statement? The statement of Rabbi Yehuda that says that you have until, for Musaf, you have to finish Musaf by the 7th hour. Now, if until means until, but not including, that means that you have until the 7th hour, but not including the 7th hour. It means you have to finish Musaf by noon, because the hour after noon is called the 7th hour. So if you have until the 7th hour means until, but not including, it means you have until noon to do Musaf. Now, is it possible, according to that, to have Musaf and Mincha at the same time? No, because Mincha, you don't daven until a half hour after noon. And Musaf, you have to finish by noon. How could Rabbi Yehuda talk about a case of having to daven both prayers, Mincha and Musaf, at the same time? It must be that until means until and including, and therefore when he says until the 7th hour, it means until and including the 7th hour. And if it means until and including the 7th hour, it means you could daven Musaf until 1 o'clock. And if you could daven Musaf until 1 o'clock, then you're able to have Mincha and Musaf at the same time, and you have to decide which one should take precedence. And so therefore, the Gemara says, you see from there that until means until and including. But that contradicts the earlier point of the Mishnah, which clearly means until but not including. So what does the word until mean? Does it mean ad, until and including, or until and not including? The Gemara concludes and says that really there's one mistake that we made. When we say until halfway through Mincha, it does mean until and including, but it means until and including the first half. not until and including the second half. So that's what the Gemara changes in the end. That when we say until mincha, we mean until the first half of mincha, until and including the first half of mincha. That's how long you can daven mincha, is until and including the first half of this mincha. Mincha was the 2.5 hour time period at the end of the day, and you have until the first half of that, until and including the first half, to daven mincha during that time. Until the first half of mincha, the 2.5 hour period from 3:30 till 6 o'clock, that first half of that period until 4:45, you have until and including that first half. Initially, we thought we meant until the second half of mincha, and that's why we couldn't understand how could it be until and including. Now the Gemara answered that it means until and including the first half of mincha. In this way, we have no problem. Whenever it says until, it means until and including. And that's basically covers the Gemara that we learned yesterday. Okay, I think we had a question. David had a question about Musaf. So I was looking it up, and I think this answers it. In chapter 286 of the Shulchan Aruch, it mentions that the laws of Musaf on Shabbos. The time for Musaf starts immediately after Shacharis, and you shouldn't stretch it longer than the 7th hour. You shouldn't push it off until after till the end of the 7th hour. But if you did, if you davened it after the 7th hour, you're called a poisheya, someone who is like irresponsible. They're called like a sinner. And even though he did that, he still fulfills his obligation because the obligation applies all day. So it seems that it's preferable to daven it, Musaf, before the end of the 7th hour. But if you didn't, you could still daven it all day. If you forgot to daven it until the end of the day, you cannot make it up. And it has Berchas Kohanim in the Musaf. And then the Ramah says a very important point. He says, if you davened it before Shacharis, you daven Musaf first, Yoitza, you have fulfilled your obligation. So that's an interesting point because what we see there is that the reason why you're supposed to daven it after Shacharis is because the first sacrifice in the day is supposed to be the Karban Tamid, the morning sacrifice, and that's the morning prayer. And afterwards, you bring all the other sacrifices, which would be the Musaf. But if you didn't, the time for Musaf really begins in the morning, and any time in the morning, and therefore you could even do it if you did it before the morning prayer, you did fulfill your obligation. And so, I think that touches upon what David was wondering about, if it's connected to the Shacharis prayer. And it seems that it's not specifically connected to the Shacharis prayer. There are issues with eating before it. A certain amount a person would be allowed to eat. Less, you can't eat more than a kabeya. But other than that, it seems that it's even, theoretically, if a person davened before Shacharis, he did fulfill his obligation. You're allowed to taste before Musaf fruits and even bread, a small amount of bread, which is a kabeya, because it's called a temporary eating. And then it talks about what we were discussing. If a person has to daven mincha and musaf, it talks about that there as well. And the point is, it mentions that if we in a community, in the shul, in a congregation, if you daven mincha before musaf, we're afraid you might end up davening mincha on another time too early, before midday. And therefore, we don't encourage. We in a congregation, the law is you always daven musaf before mincha. But if you're an individual, then there are times when you should daven mincha before musaf as an individual. I think Susan had her hand up first. Susan?
Yes, I just want to ask something quick. Is halakhapedia.com a good
Yes.
site for
Yes.
information? Okay.
Yes.
One more thing. The hour is 66 minutes and how many seconds?
An hour is 66 minutes.
How
Only,
many seconds?
well, this is today's hour. It's going to change tomorrow. I'm going to give you everyday changes because it depends on sunrise and sunset. So,
Oh, okay, okay.
so each day is different. An hour, when I mentioned that, that time of 66 minutes, that was because that day had more than was
Okay.
longer than 12. For example, today, the day begins at 6:54. When does it end? It ends at 8:20. So if you take 6:54 till 8:20, how many hours are in that time? Really, it's 13 hours plus. It's like 13 and a half hours. But you have to divide that into 12 parts. Because if you want to know the fourth hour of the day, you got to divide. Now, again, we're starting the day at 6:54 a.m., finishing it at 8:20. So we have 13 and a half hours there. We're dividing that into 12 parts. So every hour is actually 65 minutes and 40 seconds.
Now I get it.
5 minutes and 40 seconds would be an hour. Now, tomorrow it's going to change because tomorrow's sunrise is going to be maybe a minute earlier, and sunset is going to also be, or tomorrow's sunrise might be a minute later, and sunset is going to be a minute earlier. So it's going to fluctuate the hours. Sometimes an hour will be 75 minutes. Sometimes an hour will be 50 minutes. So it depends on the time of the year, and it depends on how far you are from the equator. And, and that's what causes there to be difference in what season. Okay. Yes, Ben.
In our synagogue, the Shachrit and Shabbat starts at 10 o'clock, which is kind of late. And some people, usually I see 2 or 3 people would leave before Musaf. So maybe because it's so late, they did Musaf before the Shachrit.
I don't know about that. You're trying to judge them very favorably, which is a mitzvah. Have a done as kol ha'adam lakaf zuchus. You're trying to judge them favorably. They're being extra strict. I have a feeling they have prayer indigestion and they can't daven so long. That would be my thought. But
it's possible that some of them,
or they have guests.
Before.
Well, let's see. When is noon today? Today in Florida. Again, this 65 minutes, Susan, is only in Florida at this today. But noon, midday is 1:24. Midday is 1:24, which would mean that preferably you should daven Musaf by 1:24 plus 65 minutes.
Oh.
So that means you have until 2:30 approximately to daven Musaf.
By us, it comes out usually at 12 something.
Midday?
Yeah, that we do Musaf. Well, it's usually around 12, 10, 12, 15, something like that.
So it doesn't sound like that would be the reason why they're leaving.
Okay.
So
maybe they're doing the mitzvah of Shalom Bayis.
Right. They might have other reasons. Maybe they have guests, maybe,
Yeah.
Okay, so let's continue. Unless there's other questions. Any other questions? Susan, is your hand still up? Oh. Susan, oh, okay. No problem. Okay. So let's continue. The Gemara now wants to prove that the fourth hour, when we say the fourth hour, you have until the fourth hour, it means until and including the fourth hour. And the Gemara proves it from a Mishnah where where it says that you can bring the sacrifice, the morning sacrifice is brought in the fourth hour. And when it says it's brought in the fourth hour, that means that it's brought during the fourth hour, until and including. You see it from the fact that it says it was brought in the fourth hour. And so that's what we're gonna learn now, that this brisa follows this logic. So again, what we've concluded is until means until, and when it says the word ad, until, it means until and including, and you have until and including the fourth hour. Now we're going to read this Mishnah. So the Mishnah is a Mishnah in Idias, and this is a group of Mishnayos. The Mishnayos called Idias is a group of Mishnayos that were all learned and concluded all different questions that the Jewish people had in all the yeshivas that were discussed. They had conclusions over there and final conclusions, and it had to do with the fact that they were able to have all the rabbis together and make these final conclusions, because Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah became in charge, and they allowed everyone into the Beis Medrash, and they were able to have all the people there, all the great rabbis together. So the Gemara says we're now about 20 lines down from the top of the page.
What page? What page, Rabbi? 20?
Page 27a, 27a.
Thank you.
27a, about 20 lines from the top. Amar Rav Nachman, Afanan Nami Tanina. We also learned it in a Mishnah. Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava, Hayid, Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava testified, Chamisha Devarim, 5 things. He testified about these 5 things. And what did he testify? Shememanin es haktana. That there is a scenario where we tell a girl who's underage that she should do miyun. Miyun is she should refuse to be with her husband anymore. What is the case? The case is that normally Jewish law allows a father to marry off his daughter, his single daughter. What happens if the father passed away and the girl is underage? So there's a rabbinic law. The rabbis were nervous that the girl might be abused by inappropriate people. And therefore, they said it's best if we get her married off. However, we have a problem because the father passed away already, and the Torah gives the father permission to marry her off. But here, the father passed away. So the rabbi said, we're going to establish a law that the mother and the brothers can marry her off, get her married off to an appropriate husband. And this way, she won't be abused and harassed by evil people and that could take advantage of. So the Torah, so the rabbis made such a decree. Now their marriage is a rabbinic marriage. It's not biblical. It's not considered married biblically, but the rabbis felt it was such an important thing in those days that they established this law. They also established the law that she doesn't need a divorce if she's not happy at any point. She can tell her husband in front of a beis din, I don't want you anymore. They don't need to write a whole get, a whole divorce. And this would make it permissible for her marriage to be dissolved. Now, the case that we're talking about here there's an additional issue that happened. What happened was this girl, who's an orphan, her father had passed away. She has an older sister who's biblically married, and a tragedy hit, and her husband passed away, and they have no kids. So again, we're talking about the older sister. So let's give two names. We have Rachel and Leia. Leia is the older sister. Rachel is the younger sister. Rachel is married in a rabbinic marriage. Rachel is married in a rabbinic marriage to her husband. And Leia was married in a biblical marriage because she was an adult when she got married. She was an adult. She got married biblically. And her husband now just passed away. So the law is that her husband is supposed to marry her husband who passed away. She's supposed to marry her husband's brother. The brother is called Yibum, because when a man passes away without kids, we encourage the brother of the deceased to marry the wife. Now, in this scenario, it's two brothers married two sisters. So let's give a name to the two brothers. We have Yaakov, we have, let's say, Reuven and Shimon. So Reuven was married to Leah, and Shimon is married to Rachel. Reuven is married to Leah biblically. Shimon is married to Rachel rabbinically. And now Reuven passed away. So again, Reuven's wife is Leah, and she has a mitzvah to marry Shimon because her husband passed away. They have no kids. So it's called Yibum, the Levirate marriage. And she's supposed to marry Shimon. The problem is she can't marry Shimon at this point because Shimon is rabbinically married to the sister. And if he's married to the sister, you're not allowed to marry your wife's sister when your wife is alive. And it's called Achois Ishtoi, the wife of the sister of your wife. You can't marry your wife and her sister as long as one of them is alive. So what do you do? So here there is an option for Shimon. He has a biblical obligation to marry Leah, but he's rabbinically married to Rachel. So we encourage him to say he no longer wants his wife, Rachel. And this way he can fulfill the biblical obligation of marrying Leah. So we tell him, we encourage him that he should do miyun, and this way he retroactively removes his marriage, that he was never married to his wife. That's the way the rabbis established it, that it's considered retroactively they're not married. In this way, because it gets removed retroactively, I should have mentioned that earlier, that when the man does miyun when she says she no longer wants her husband, we encourage her to say she no longer wants her husband. And when she does that, it removes the marriage retroactively. And what happens is, can this man, Shimon, now marry Leah? Is Leah considered his wife's sister? No, because Shimon was never married to Rachel. What do you mean? He was married. The rabbis established a marriage. Yeah, but they also established that miyun retroactively removes that marriage. And because of that, it was never considered a marriage. So that's the first statement that Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava says, that mimanin, we encourage the girl to refuse her husband, to say she no longer wants to be with her husband. In this way, her husband will be able to fulfill the biblical obligation of yibum. And that's the first statement. The second statement, Shemasina se'isha al pi dechad. The next statement is a very famous law, that a woman whose husband is lost, and there's one witness that says he died, that he knows, he saw that the person died, that is good enough for testimony. Normally, we need two witnesses for testimony. But when it comes a situation where a man passed away and we want to permit the wife to get married, one witness is good enough for that. So that's the second law of his, that we can marry off a woman even if there's only one witness that says her husband died. We will marry her off. We will allow her to get married. The altarna girl shenisko b'Yerushalayim. The third law is that there was a chicken that it killed a child. It stuck its beak into the child's area on the child's head where it's very soft, and it pierced the brain and it caused the child to die. And the law is that you stone, normally you stone an ox that gores, but here this was a chicken. And the law is that just like an ox gets stoned if it kills, if it gores a person, so the same thing is the chicken. Actually, I'm not 100% sure. Does it mean that the child died, or did it just? It says that it nikevas moichle. It pierced the brain. Does the art scroll say the child died, or the Koran, or did it just gore it? It does say it pierced the brain. I don't know if that means that the child died, but in any event, the law is that the bird, the chicken, gets stoned.
Rabbi, it says sheharag.
Harag. Okay.
It says that the bird killed it.
The bird killed. So normally we talk about an ox that gores, and here we're saying something unique, that it's not only an ox, that we're adding something not like additional, something extra that we wouldn't have known automatically. In other words, everyone knows the law by an ox that gores. So Hashor Yisakel, it says the ox gets stoned, and but here.
Rabbi, I have a question. I'm sorry.
Yeah, because that's the case. The case is where it kills. Right. Of course, it has to be that it killed. Okay, I take that back. There's no question. Of course, it's talking about where it killed. Okay, yes.
Okay, if somebody deliberately goes in front of an ox and gets gored to death, deliberately, if the person deliberately makes that move, number one. Number two, before, you're talking about an annulment of a marriage that
Yes.
you can.
Yeah, we're talking
But
about
what
annulment
about
of
the
marriage.
sanctity of the woman? The woman now has lost her virginity. How can you call it how can she get married
No,
again?
right. That's a good question. It's a very good question. It's a very individualized scenario. In other words, this is not the norm. This is a case where the rabbis in those days felt that there was a mitzvah, there was an obligation on them to save for the safety of this girl who was going to hang out, maybe with people, and could end up being vulnerable to inappropriate people. They felt this would be the best thing for her, that if she has a husband, even though she's underage, she's under the age of 12, and yet the rabbis felt that this would benefit her to be married. At the same time, they allowed her to annul that marriage. And again, it's a rabbinic decree in the first place. The rabbis established the decree. They also established that it could be annulled. It's their own invention, so to speak, that they're allowed to do. They're allowed to make such a law. And they also allowed that it could be annulled because it's not biblically standing. It's not an official marriage. It's not a biblical marriage. It's only rabbinically.
All right. So is it?
So that's
so
one.
All right. So is it
that's one law.
possible that she never slept with a man? So it's not consummated?
It could be, but it doesn't have to be.
It doesn't matter. In other words,
Doesn't matter.
it doesn't matter. Okay.
Right.
Right.
Now, the second thing is that the second scenario is that the second question you asked, the first question you asked, I should say, is about if a person goes in front of the ox.
Right. Deliberately.
Yeah, I don't know if the ox gets the because if the man walks into the ox and the ox doesn't gore the man walks into it, or I don't know if that's called the ox goring. It sounds to me more like a person committing suicide.
Right.
So I don't know. I don't know if that's that would be have any connection. But in any event, that is the third law. And then the fourth law is right, of course. The Gemara says, "Al tarnagol sheniskol b'Yushalayim al shahara nefesh." Thank you, Ezra, because it killed, because the tarnagol, the chicken killed the person, the child, and bi'al yayin, and for wine ben arboim yoim, that's 40 days old, shenes nasech al gabi hamizbeach, that it can be poured on the altar. Again, it takes time for wine to ferment, and the Gemara here says that it's 40 days is the minimum time that it takes to be wine that's able to be considered wine. And now all these cases were not necessary for our Gemara. That all these other cases were side points. Now comes the main point, and this is why we actually brought this whole brisa, the Mishnah, and that is for this final statement: the al tamid shal shachar, for the morning sacrifice, shekarev bi'arba shois, that it is brought in the fourth hour. The morning sacrifice is brought in the fourth hour. Now, what do we see from here? Why did Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava testify this law that it's brought in the fourth hour? Because he's saying that the halacha follows this opinion that it's supposed to be only in the fourth hour and not later. And our Gemara is bringing this to show that it's in the fourth hour and not up until the fourth hour. So again, the purpose of the statement, again, we brought these 5 cases in a Mishnah, and all these 5 cases are to tell you that these are the halacha, that these were what they concluded. And the reason our Gemara is bringing it is to show this point that when it says until, it means until and including. Ad vi shel shma mina, we see from here, ad viad bechlal shma mina. It is a good proof. We hear from this that it means until and including. Now, Amar Rav Kahana says, halacha ka Reb Yehuda, the halacha follows Reb Yehuda, hoyel utnan bebechirta kavosei, since we learned in the chosen Mishnah, like him, these are the Mishnahs and Idias are called the chosen Mishnah. So the chosen Mishnahs mentioned this halacha, so it means that is the final verdict, that you're really supposed to daven shachris before the fourth hour. This is a little surprising, because you'll find in many Hasidic shuls and many Hasidic great masters that they would daven after the fourth hour. But the Gemara concludes pretty clearly that you're supposed to daven within the fourth, before the end of the fourth hour, and that is the that is the halacha. It's brought in Shulchan Aruch and so on. And the only leniency that I'm aware of that people sort of rely on to daven later is that if someone is learning Hasidic teachings that will make their davening into a davening, will give them a feeling of love for Hashem, that their davening will be considered a davening, and if they don't study Hasidic teachings, then they feel their davening will not be with a feeling of love for Hashem. So that would be a leniency that if they daven now, it's not really a davening. So if they learn Hasidic teachings and then they daven afterwards, at least their davening will be a davening. They'll miss the proper time of davening before the 4 hours. But in Shulchan Aruch, it does give the permissibility that if you do miss it, even if you miss it on purpose, you are allowed to daven until noon. So there is a leniency to daven until noon, even if you purposely miss it. Now, after noon, if you purposely miss it, that's a problem. You can only if you make them you can only do a makeup Shemana Esrei and daven 2 minchas if you made a mistake. But if you purposely miss it, you can't make it up. Here, the halacha is that if you purposely miss it, you can make it up until noon. Because the rabbis do hold you have until noon. So you can make it up even if you purposely miss it. That's what's brought in Shulchan Aruch. So you can make it up until noon, but the appropriate time really is by the end of the 4th hour. That I
Rabbi,
believe.
can I ask you,
Yeah.
what about when we have solar and lunar eclipses? Does the time, the allotted times change? In other words,
No. Sun,
Okay.
most of the, most things are dependent on sunrise and sunset, and basically it stays the same every year. It's the same
so
thing.
whether we lose the sun or not has nothing to do with,
If
with
it
the
rains and you don't see the sun rise because it's rainy, it still rises. You just don't see it, and it's still
Right.
rising at the same time.
Okay, thank you.
If you're in a room that doesn't have windows, but it doesn't matter. The sun, it goes by when the sun rises and so on. Okay. The next Gemara, Mantana Laha, who is the author of this Titnan that we learned as follows. V'cham hashemesh v'nomos. It says that the sun got hot and it melted the manna. V'cham hashemesh v'nomos. So the Gemara asked, who is the source of this statement? What does the statement say? The verse says the sun got hot and melted the manna. The arba shois. This is referring to the 4th hour of the day. Arba shois. Ata omer b'arba shois. Eina yela b'sheish shois. You are telling me that this is in the 4th hour of the day that the sun got hot and melted the manna. This is in the 4th. Maybe it means in the 6th hour the sun got hot. In the 6th hour it's even hotter. So when it says in Bereshis that he was standing there at the heat of the day, so Chaim Hayoim is one statement. Cham Hashemesh is another statement. Chaim Hayoim means the heat of the day. That's noon. Harei Sheishos. That's 6 hours. And it's referring to when Abraham was sitting at the entrance of the gate of his tent. K'chaim hayoim. Doesn't say chaim hashemesh. Cham hashemesh like our pasuk. So it means that means 6 hours. Hamani makayem. What do I do with the verse? V'cham hashemesh v'namas. The sun got hot and melted. What does that refer to? Be'arba shois. That is in the 4th hour of the day. Now, what do we see from here? So what the Gemara is basically saying is that you have to understand another verse in that paragraph. There's a verse in that paragraph that says, Vayilkatu oisai ba'boker ba'boker. They gathered the manna every morning. And then it says, V'cham hashemesh v'nomos. So the morning they gathered it, and then the sun got hot and melted it. Now, what that implies is, if it melted it in the 4th hour, when did they gather it? They gathered it earlier than that, right? Because if it melted, it would be hard to gather. So they gathered it earlier than when it melted. If they didn't gather it, it would have melted. So they gathered it by Yilkatu Aisai Babiker in the morning, and then it melted. And then when did it melt? In the 4th hour. So what that implies is that the morning, they gathered it in the morning. What does the morning mean? It means before the 4th hour. So this really connects to the previous Gemara. The previous Gemara was saying, when is morning? Rabbi Yehuda holds it's including up and until and including the 4th hour is morning. And that's why you could bring the sacrifice in the morning. And here the Gemara talks about the manna melting, and it talks about collecting the manna in the morning, and it implies that the morning ends before the 4th hour, because the manna melts in the 4th hour, and they collected it in the morning. So it implies that the morning ends before they collected it. So that's what the Gemara is bothered with. Who is this going to go like? It can't go like Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says you have, including the 4th hour, to be the morning, and the rabbis say you even have until noon to be the morning.
Rabbi,
Yes.
I think that there must be a reason that they say baboker twice, morning.
Okay.
Meaning it's early in the morning.
Right. Okay. So this is good. You're saying that. We're gonna see. So that's one of the points the Gemara makes. So the Gemara asks, Mani loy Rabbi Yehuda v'loy Rabbanon. Who does this go like? It can't go like Rabbi Yehuda, because Rabbi Yehuda says it's morning until after the 4th hour. And it can't be like the Rabbanon, the rabbis, because they say it's morning until noon. So the Gemara answers. One second. The Gemara said, if it's Rabbi Yehuda until the 4th hour is also morning. And until midday is still morning. So the Gemara answers, we're now the 4th wide line. If you want, you could say this fits with Rabbi Yehuda. If you want, you could say it fits with the rabbis. If you want, you could say it fits with the morning. Amar kra ba-boker. Verse says, morning. What does that mean? It means there's 2 mornings. You have to divide it into 2 that they collected it in the first morning. The first 3 hours, they collected it. That's the first morning. And then it melted afterwards, but they collected it in the biker, as we just heard from Ben, that it says ba biker, and it uses the word biker twice, meaning that you divide the morning into 2. If you want, it could fit with the Rebbe Yehuda also, and this is the next answer. The Gemara says, "V'ba yistema Rebbe Yehuda." If you want, it could fit with Rebbe Yehuda. Hi biker yistera. This extra word biker, lahaktim loisha achas, that it's in the earlier part of the morning. That means they collected it before the end of the morning, in the biker in the earlier part of the morning, before the final hour of the morning, to make it earlier 1 hour. That means it was still morning when it melted. But they collected it before it melted when it was the earlier part of the morning. To Kulei Alma Miha, everyone agrees, however, that the sun got hot and it melted it in the 4th hour. So the Gemara says, my mashma. How is it understood? How do you see that from the sun got hot? That it means that it's in the 4th hour. So the Gemara answers, Amar Rav Acha Bar Yaakov. Rav Acha Bar Yaakov says, Amar Kra B'cham Hashemesh V'namas, the sun got hot, and it melted. Ezo Hisha Shemesh Cham V'hatzel Tzoinen. What does it mean the sun got hot? It means that in the sunny areas, it's hot, but in the shady areas, it's not hot. It's shady. So when it tells you that the sun got hot, it doesn't mean noontime, because that's when the whole day is hot. But when the sun is hot, meaning in sunny areas it's hot, but in shady areas it's not hot, that would be in the 4th hour of the day. When is the sun? In the sunny areas, it's hot, but in the shady areas, it's shady. This would mean in the 4th hour. So we see from here that now, before the 4th hour, even in sunny areas, it's not so hot. But at the 4th hour, in the sunny areas, it's hot. And after that, even in shady areas, it gets hot. So if anyone wants to go jogging, you learn from our Gemara in Florida, that make sure to go jogging before the 4th hour of the day, because in the 4th hour of the day in sunny areas, it's going to be hot. And after the 4th hour, even in shady areas, it's going to be hot. The Gemara, and that's a verse, that the sunny areas will get hot and melt the manna by the 4th hour, which means that there must be, I don't know if someone wanted to look in the weather and see if there's a big difference between the 3rd hour of the day and the 4th hour of the day of the temperature, but it sounds from this Gemara that it like heats up by that the 4th hour of the day is when the day really, there's definitely an element of heat that kicks in on the fourth hour of the day. Now, what's interesting about the earlier Gemara that we learned is that the Talmud Shel Shachar was brought, it says it was brought in the 4th hour. Now, was the Talmud Shel Shachar, was the morning sacrifice really brought so late? The morning sacrifice was generally, that was like, that might be the deadline, but generally they started very early in the morning. And
Rabbi, can I interrupt you?
yes,
Maybe daybreak. In other words, the manna was collected before daybreak. Did they have such a concept of daybreak?
daybreak meaning sunrise. What do you mean
Yeah.
daybreak? Sunrise?
Yes and no. There's an area before before you see the sun, that
Right.
it's in that, like you talk about that gray area.
Right. So you mean like dawn? Yeah, but
Yeah.
but it's basically saying that they collected it in the morning. So it's not only
Not that early
daybreak,
then?
but
Okay.
from daybreak until the way until the 4th hour. And at the
Okay.
4th hour, it was already too late because during that 4th hour, it started melting.
Right. So it has
So-
to be eaten. The manna had to be eaten before it started, right?
Nope, not eaten. It was collected then. You had all day to eat it.
Oh,
Couldn't leave it over. You weren't allowed to leave it over, but it was collected in the morning.
okay.
So because if you left it out, it would have melted. So the previous Gemara mentioned that the Talmud Shel Shachar was brought in the 4th hour. So the commentaries mention over here that this is referring to once in one time. It was one story where this happened, that they brought the Talmud Shel Shachar, they brought it on the 4th hour, and that was the morning after King Solomon married the daughter of Pharaoh. And some of you maybe know the Medrash. There's a famous Medrash about it, that when then King Solomon married the daughter of Pharaoh, so they celebrated all night, and he fell asleep, and he woke up late, and they didn't bring the morning sacrifice, and they sent his mother to go wake him up, and it's his mother had to rebuke him for not waking up on time to bring the morning sacrifice. And that is the time, that is this story of the Talmud Shel Shachar was brought once in the 4th hour, but that was the deadline to bring the morning sacrifice. The reason he didn't wake up.
Why did they need the king to bring the Ola?
I guess they needed his permission. I don't know. Maybe he was. I'm not sure. I don't know. I have to look up the Medrash to be more clear. But somehow they had a beautiful canopy over over the bed, and it had stars. And when he woke up, he saw it was still dark, so he went back to sleep. But really, it was just a picture of stars. It was a creation of stars. It wasn't actually the night stars. But but I'm not sure. It is I'm not sure why they waited for it. Maybe David, do you know this Medrash, David?
No, I had another question.
Okay. You're not familiar with this Medrash of Shlomo HaMelech? We'll have to take a look. I'm sure we can find it in the Medrash. I'll have to pull it up. Isaac, question. Isaac, yes, David.
I was going to ask on Babokar, instead of saying morning by morning, it means to divide it into 2 mornings. one according to the rabbis. Instead of that, it seems like the simple meaning would be more boker, which means each and every morning, like yom yom. It means on a daily basis. That's what Baboker is trying to tell you every single morning, regardless if it's Shabbos, regardless if it's Rosh Chodesh. It means each and every morning. That would seem to be the more literal translation, or the more easy translation, rather than this.
Interesting.
Then they would say Baboker Boker without Baboker. Like Yom Yom. It's not Bayom.
The place to look that up would be in a Chumash, what is it? It's the Chumash that has all the Talmudic statements in it. Base Torah Tmima, Chumash Torah Tmima. He has he would go through the different Talmudic interpretation. He'll explain why it doesn't mean this, why it doesn't mean the simple meaning, and it has to mean that. I don't see anything here in Rashi in other words, you're asking if you could just translate it in the simple way. Why is the Gemara going out of its way to explain it that way? Baboker. You have a good question. I have to take a look. I have a Chumash Torah Tmima, but I don't have access to it right now. Maybe Isaac. Do you have a Chumash Torah Tmima, Isaac?
I do, but I'm in the car right now.
Yeah, okay.
So I don't have it handy. Oh, wait, I can find it on Safaria maybe. What were you looking for?
Vayilkatu Oisai Baboker, and let's see. I also have Safaria. Let me try it. Let me see. Vayilkatu. It's in Shemais chapter 16:21. 16:21, and let's see if Safaria has it. 16:21. Tanakh. Shemais. I don't know if it has it here.
No, it only has the translation.
Torah Tmima. Okay, Baboker. Akdam Leisha. Baboker. Oh yeah, it doesn't have his commentary on the bottom. Open Torah Tmima. Oh, maybe it does. Let's see. No, I don't see it. I don't see his commentary. All right, I have to take a look in the actual Torah Tmima. Okay, that basically concludes this little piece of Gemara here, and the next Gemara, I guess we could start. We have a few minutes, unless anyone has a question. Nope. Okay, next Gemara. Tfilas hamincha ad ha'erev. The Tfilas hamincha is until evening. Amar le Rav Chizil Rav Yitzchak Hasam Amar Rav Kahana Halacha Rav Yehuda. So it says that the mincha prayer, we have an argument. Is mincha prayer until evening or until plag hamincha, right? That's what the argument of the... So the question is, what did we just say? Who's the halacha like regarding shacharis? Regarding shacharis, the halacha follows Rabbi Yehuda, that you really have until 4 hours. What about mincha? Who's the halacha follow? Does it follow Rabbi Yehuda here as well? So Amar le Rav Chisda le Rav Yitzchok Hasam Amar Rav Kahana. Over there in the morning prayer, Rav Kahana said halacha Rav Yehuda Hayelu Tanan B'Cherta Kavosei. Since we learned in the chosen Mishnah, which is Idias, those Mishnayos, the halacha follows, and we learned that over there that we follow Rav Yehuda's opinion regarding the morning prayer, that it's until 4 hours in the day and not until midday. What about regarding Mincha? Do we follow Rav Yehuda that you have until Plaga Mincha? So the Gemara says, and over there we said that the halacha follows Rav Yehuda. Hachamai, but here, what is the halacha? By Mincha, Ishtik, he was quiet. Rav Yitzchok was quiet. V'loy Amar le, v'loy midi, and he didn't say anything. He didn't answer him. Amar Rav Chisda nach zeyana. So Rav Chisda said, let's see. Mi de Rav matzli shal Shabbos be'erev Shabbos, mi ba'oid yom. Rav, he used to daven the Shabbos davening on erev Shabbos when it was still day. Shma mina halacha to Rav Yehuda. So we see from here that the halacha follows Rav Yehuda. The Gemara says, Adarab. You could say the opposite. On the contrary, Mida Rav Huna Rabbanan loy have a matzli. Since Rav Huna and the rabbis did not daven ad wort until it was dark, Shema mina ein halacha to Rav Yehuda. We see from here that the halacha doesn't follow Rav Yehuda. So you have two ways of looking at it. If you want to follow Rav, seems like the halacha is like Rav Yehuda. If you want to follow the rabbis and Rav Huna, the halacha is not like Rabbi Yehuda, like the rabbis. You have it from mincha, you can daven until night. So hashta delay itmar hilchasa loy kamar v'loy kamar. Since we don't have a ruling of the clear-cut halacha that it's not like this one and not like that one, so we don't have anyone that we're supposed to follow. Therefore, the Ovid Kamar Ovid, the Ovid Kamar Ovid. If you follow this rabbi Ovid, you followed him. If you follow the other rabbi, you followed him. In other words, if whoever you follow, you have who to rely upon. So that's the conclusion of the Gemara, which is very interesting. Regarding Shachris, the halacha follows Rabbi Yehuda. Regarding Mincha, it doesn't follow either of them. If you want to follow Rabbi Yehuda's view, you can follow Rabbi Yehuda's view. You want to follow the rabbi's view, you follow the rabbi's view. So you have either until Plaga Mincha, you have until night. It depends who you want to follow. I mentioned earlier on that there is a reason that whoever you follow, you should generally follow or always follow that view. So if you want to be an early bird type of person, and you always want to do things early, you want to go to sleep early, you want to daven Ma'ariv, you could follow Rabbi Yehuda's view. And you could be an early mincha guy and always daven mincha before the example would be 4:45 would be like on a day that's 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. 4:45 would be your mincha deadline, and 4:45 would be when you could start davening Ma'ariv. If you want to be a Rabbi Yehuda guy, you could follow Rabbi Yehuda, but you always should follow him. And if you want to be the regular norm, which is until night, so you would follow the rabbis and you have until night, but you could follow whoever you wish to follow. There's no specific ruling that you have to follow one rabbi, that the halacha only follows one. You could go according to any of them, which is very interesting. So the mornings, the halacha is until 4 hours. The night is until you could follow the Plaga Mincha option, or you could follow the night option. Okay, everyone, have a wonderful day. Sei gesund.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Stay safe, everyone.
See everybody
Thank you,
tomorrow
Rabbi.
this
Thank you, Rabbi.
afternoon.